I'm waiting for the screen in this room to start up. It shut off for some reason.
It's been terrible. My data science class is in here.
Really?
Last semester.
You always gave presentations for your six months, or for decades. I always turned off at 5 o'clock. I think that's a problem.
So yeah.
Every time, yeah, on the dot.
Hmm. So let's hope it doesn't shut off again. There we go.
You'll be doing now.
So this is how not to give a seminar. And the first thing you don't want to do is misspell your own name in the title slide, like Chris intentionally did, to illustrate what not to do, and gave UWT, which I guess he meant UMT there as well. So 2 mistakes in one slide. You know, I would start out by saying you're the best judge of what a good presentation is. I'm going to give you a bunch of kind of gobbledygook that you guys already probably know, but having listened to a lot of, well, lectures, that's a presentation, and also scientific presentations, you can be a critic and decide for yourself that you don't want to be that speaker who doesn't do a good job or has certain flaws in their presentation. So, and you might even, you know, when you're going through 630, take notes on what you like and don't like about a presentation and use that as a catalog to refine or build your own presentation later when you have to do that. So I really encourage you to be your own judge on what is good quality presentation. I don't know if you guys have seen this website. Can I get rid of the, there we go. Okay, I can't see you guys anymore, but it's nothing personal, but have you guys seen these PhD comics? They're excellent. The guy, he was a mechanical engineering PhD from Stanford or something, and his like side entertainment was to do these comics. And you can Google PhD comics and you'll relate totally to every one of these as a grad student, because it's all about being a grad student. And they're really funny. They make fun of professors really effectively in this. So, yeah, chime in outside. The people aren't here if there's any issues, because I can't see you now. But you know, here's a little tidbit of information. There's tons of this kind of stuff out there, but if a talk fails, it's almost always because the speaker didn't frame it correctly, misjudged the audience level of interest, or neglected to tell a story. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about, is giving a presentation as a narrative, as a story, instead of a bunch of sequence of facts and or accomplishments or something like that. But there's, you know, if you Google how to give a good presentation, there's a lot of stuff out there. This one was more about TED Talks, you know, which are totally different than any kind of talk you're going to give, unless you give a TED Talk, because you rehearse and you memorize, and generally we don't do that for a scientific presentation. You just don't have time to do it. And there are negatives to doing it as well, because you're not as free-flowing, ad-libbing, and it's not as comfortable as a presentation mode. But anyway, so you might run into info about how to give a great presentation that's a TED Talk like talk, but that maybe is not that applicable to the kinds of talks we give. But there was this other website that I saw, that's Slide.talk. It's specifically about scientific presentation. You might check that out, or just roam around yourself for this kind of information. And one other little story I'll tell you is that I remember a long time ago, it was a Nobel laureate got a really prestigious award for being a teacher. And what he said was that the only reason why he's getting this award is because he worked very hard on his presentations, his lectures. So it didn't come naturally to him. He had to work really hard at it, but he took a lot of pride in it and did a really great job. And so, you know, you don't have to be a natural presenter to give a good presentation. You just have to work hard at it. It doesn't come naturally. And even then, you have to work on you know, having good information to talk about. You create it. Um,
Mike?
yep.
Yeah, I would actually add as well that just by the fact that you're presenting, you're actually getting it even more organized in your own mind, and you're learning it better yourself by presenting the material a lot of times. And so that probably even helped that researcher that you were talking about too.
Well, right. It raises the bar if you're giving it to an audience. You can't, you know, you're sitting in your office otherwise. And a research paper is the same kind of thing. You get your information out there to be judged by the general public or your scientific peers. So this is the story sort of structure. This isn't the organization of this presentation, but it's the way you could introduce a story. So you could imagine, okay, you're getting into this, you're learning all about this topic that you're really keen on, and you learn the state of the art, what has already been done. Then your role is, so you talk about that initially, and the background information in a presentation can be a significant part of it. And the best presentations that I've seen are ones that spend a significant amount of time building the case for doing what they're doing, and not glossing over that just because you have a lot of information to present. There's always a time limit, and you have to pick your priorities. But if you focus on that background information, you're going to get the audience engrossed in the question that you're trying to address. And so when you talk about that first, and then you explain your research question, and you already have built the context for why it's important. And then you describe the strategy that you're taking in order to tackle this problem. And you know, and you talk about, you had these difficulties, you ran into these problems, you had these breakthroughs. So it becomes sort of a story that you're talking about. And then you end up talking about your specific results and the importance that we will have down the road. So I mean, that's an ideal. And you know, when it comes down to it, a lot of times you get caught up into the nuts and bolts of just getting the talk together, that you don't have a time to really develop that. But and that's why I say time versus rewards, is that if you have a lot of time to develop a really good talk, you'll get more reward for it. But then again, do you really have that much time to devote to it? So it's always a battle between you know, how much time you're going to be able to, especially when you guys already know this as grad students. You're trying to work hard in the lab, you have classes, and so it's a zero-sum game. When you all of a sudden you have to give a presentation, you have to take time from other things, and so you're always going to be juggling the weighting, which is more important. So you can't just drop everything and make this fantastic presentation at the cost of everything else. So that's just the reality of it. You know, and it's really important to do this, to be good at giving presentations. Like Chris says here, you might get a better job. Certainly, you're not going to be a top candidate if you aren't able to talk about your work in an effective manner. It can determine how successful you are. So it's worth practicing as much as possible, and that's why we have this. So every opportunity, even though it's uncomfortable, sometimes it's because of nerves, you still want to force yourself to give as many presentations as you can, just because you will get better at it. Practice will really improve your ability to give public talks. And you know, importantly, if you go out into industry, not so much in academia, because you don't really, well, you can look at it that way. If you're trying to get money for a grant, you might have to give presentations which are being evaluated, but often more so in industry, where you're in a corporate boardroom and they're giving you a research budget to do this project, and you've got to sell them that what you're doing is important. And so all of those things can depend on the quality of your presentation. You know, he says that everyone should have your own style, and there is sort of a style, scientific style, I would call it austere, something simple and clean like these slides, maybe without the little flourish over here. Because I mean, everyone has their own taste, right? But if you make it a little too flashy, or poorly color coordinated is another bad one, like too dark or too many light colors that aren't easily seen. So you guys all know that, but it's good to point out that simpler the better, I think, in terms of style. So like I have, I have these, you can do animations, but, and they're nice, but sometimes they're taken too far. But that said, I've seen a lot of good presentations with excellent animation that's used really effectively. And so that's time consuming, but could be worth it. Okay, well, we already ran into number one. Reading text, I'm doing that as well. Yeah. And disinterest, I wouldn't necessarily include that because I rarely see somebody, I think nerves can make you seem disinterested in your subject matter, but generally nerves work the other way to make you really excited about your subject matter. So it may not be such an issue, but saying things that don't appear to be true is I put that one in there myself because I see this in talks really frequently. Like, I think I have a next slide. Like, here's a correlation plot. And this could have been one of 20 talks that I've seen where the scientists will say, and we had a correlation, we found a correlation in our results, and there's a line through it, and it doesn't even seem to fit the cloud very well. But nonetheless, they say that's a correlation. Well, everyone looks around and goes, what? But they've already moved on, right? So beware that, when it's amazing. And I realize in these presentations how distorted someone's view can be of their own results. But when they present them in public, and the public sees them, they don't look at it the same way as that person does. Like they think that there isn't a correlation, that what they're saying is actually not true. And that's hardly the impression you want to give to your audience. But one way around this in this case would be a correlation coefficient and a probability of that correlation being, or the null hypothesis showing that probability is true or false. So, it's commonly said, though, it's interesting. Yeah, you don't want to run over time, and that comes down to, you do have to practice your talk and time it. Later, there's a slide that Chris says 1 to 2 slides per minute, but if you had a 30-minute talk, that would be 60 slides at the maximum that he's suggesting. That's way too many in 30 minutes, way too many. I would say 1 a minute. If you know your own pace of speaking, and but if you really have to whip to go through 60 slides, and then you've totally lost everybody in the process. So, and then also if you haven't practiced, you might run out of time, which is just shows that you aren't well prepared. You don't want to ever do that. I remember a really famous scientist, National Academy oceanographer, and these are back in the old days when you could have overhead transparencies, before PowerPoint existed. And he showed up with a stack of transparencies like this thick, and he just leafed through them and picked the ones he wanted to talk about at that time. And everyone was just, and he had 15 minutes. It was a AGU talk. And he got way over time, and they had to pull him off the stage. And this was a really well-known scientist. So, I mean, nowadays, I think scientists are more humble and realize that what they say is not the most important thing in the world. And I haven't seen a talk like that much since then, or during those times. They were pretty common. But nowadays, even the more distinguished scientists manage to keep their time within the time frame of the seminar period that they're given. defensive response to questions, you know, I don't see that happening very much, but again, that can be nerves. One way of responding to a question right away is always, oh, that's a good question. Gives you a chance to think about it. And then, you know, and there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm not sure of the answer to that question. Something I need to think about some more, you know, but the thing you don't want to do is react defensively and as if they're questioning your research. You know, you might say something like, oh, well, that's not true, you know, because we did this and that or something. It's not maybe necessary to go on the defensive like that. Yeah, there's lots of ways to screw up your talk in terms of visuals. And he has some examples here I'll show you, but one main one is they're too busy, you have too many things going on. I'll give you some examples. You know, data and tables are, hopefully you don't have to show actual numbers on your figures. I mean, numbers or tables in your plot. They're hard, obviously, for an audience to digest. You might have a number as a result of a bunch of computations or the average of all of your results or something that has big implications, but you wouldn't want to show a data table normally in a talk. Apologies or blaming others, yeah. Apologies are pretty common, like I might have already given a couple today, but you know, when you say that, it's implicating you in as being negligent in preparing your talk, because you already know that there's a problem, right? Maybe unless that problem cropped up during the talk, like PowerPoint corrupts, you know, presentations, you know, and that's maybe out of your control sometimes, but and you want to be aware of that. Don't ever load your PowerPoint talk onto a PC from a Mac and vice versa, unless you check it out thoroughly before you give it, just to be forewarned there. But when you say an apology, you say, oh, I know this table, those numbers are too small, but I was too lazy to do a better job of it, you know, paraphrasing what you're really trying to say. So don't give apologies, just say, well, you could say this, I ran out of time, just admit it, and I wasn't able to make this into a better figure, you know. I mean, just admit it, and you know, don't want any other excuses. Blaming others, I hope not. So here's a talk from an oceanographer who I know well, and he gives notoriously bad talks. And he's a really well-known oceanographer. He's a CO2 person. I won't give his name, but you know, he has these plots with way too much going on, and then generally he glosses over. He says a few things and then moves on to the next slide because he has so many slides, right? So this is a poor visual. It's got, you know, too many things in it for one slide, and some of it's probably meaningless, but he's just carrying it over from another talk or something like that. So it's really sloppy. And in contrast, like this isn't showing up very well, but this is a nice simple slide, single plot graphic, very little text. And this person, who I also know is a very good speaker and knows exactly what they're going to say on this figure, even though there's not much text. So what they would focus on in terms of stimulating their memory would just to be look at that figure, and they would know some features, exact features in that figure that they want to describe. And so you wouldn't have to have bullets down here illustrating those things, which is just clutter, because you've already in your mind said, oh, the red corresponds to, and it's all the equatorial Pacific, and you have the figure itself will prompt you, so you don't have to include a lot of extra info. Yeah, so you have to have a concise presentation. That that's that intro, like the story I was talking about. You want to emphasize that, but it's common for people to not know your audience, and the seminar speakers at 6:30 are the worst offenders of this, or maybe professors in general, because they'll, or maybe biochemists specifically, I would say, but maybe I'm guilty of it too, and you just don't know, right? Because you know all the terminology, and you think everyone else does too. But very often, the um, the the jargon will take over the talk, and people it's very challenging to bring the level down, to get around some of that jargon that you use routinely with your other expert friends and colleagues or grad students. They all know what you're talking about, but and everyone knows that 6:30 is a really diverse seminar with all areas of chemistry. Nonetheless, you'll get very limited intro material, and then lots of very specific hardcore stuff that people have a hard time understanding, and so people zone out. And that's knowing your audience, or you might even know your audience, but what you have to do is you have to adjust your talk accordingly. That's a real challenge for people. Do you find that to be true?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Well, I know when I went to ATU's obviously everyone there's they're experts, right? Anyone who's sitting in those talks are generally experts in the subject area. So sometimes they go a little bit overboard with it, but there are some regular people, or some people who don't understand the jargon that get confused and lost in the talk.
Yeah, and that's could you guys hear Damien?
It's not very clear.
Not very clear. So Damien said at one of the big conferences he goes to, talks are 15 minutes, and they're can be pretty technical or not very accessible. And I think that is a tough one in a 15-minute, when you know you have a lot of experts in the audience and you want to speak to them. It's really tricky to pull that off and get a broader brush of understanding. But I would say err on the side of the broad brush, because you're going to the experts are going to understand you, and they're going to see the significance of it. But you're going to carry along a lot of those other people that don't have that knowledge. So it's hard to do it for a short talk like that. In a 50-minute seminar, there's really no excuse, but it's more challenging for those short talks. Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think what a lot of people should really strive for is to just really try to explain. I mean, you can't go into a lot of really in-depth detail, especially in a 15-minute talk, but what you do present, you want to try to explain it and give that as a good take-home message. So when the audience walks out of there, they have something that they understand and they can take away from the talk. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can give too much or not do a good job. But if you just focus on that message that you want to make sure your audience takes home, I think that's really the key in a lot of ways. But
you guys all hear that? Yeah. So it is critical. And what is the point of getting up in front of a bunch of people and leaving them clueless about what you're doing? That's a failure. And so to err on the side of getting more people to understand what you're talking about is a really good idea, I think. And so you can say things that a lot of people understand. There's nothing wrong with that. And then going through your slides and talking in detail about them instead of going quickly through them will also really help. Like for an AGU talk, those are 15-minute talks with questions. Even you're supposed to finish in 12 minutes. These are the conferences that environmental scientists go to, and I have maybe 12 slides. I just talk about a slide for 2 minutes, and then one for it's maybe a picture or something, and you're there for 10 seconds. But anyway, so take your time through the slides and do not have too many slides. It's crucial. Yeah. So preparation and professionalism are key to making a good impression. I think everyone strives to, have a high level of professionalism in a talk, like the brush their hair or whatever, wear decent clothes. It's just harder to do a good talk. That's what all the preparation is, really time consuming and challenging. These are things we already kind of mentioned. Picture's worth 1,000 words. So like I said, in that one figure, that's going to prompt your memory what you want to talk about. So you don't need any extra text in there. Having videos now can be useful, like just to stimulate the audience, like you guys do field work, have a little video of things, flying over a forest fire or whatever, or even a animation of like a protein, coupling to, there's so much cool video stuff out there nowadays. And I think it's less prone to problems that I really encourage people to utilize that kind of technology. So these are example slides that Chris had in his talk. So, equations with small text. And this looks ridiculous to me, but I would never have a slide like this, but he's just showing that like it happens. I mean, he wouldn't have a slide like this either, but, and there's a lot going on here. So you probably want to introduce those equations in an animated form so that they're not all coming out at once, and lead the audience through the details of these calculations, that kind of thing. Table, which, yeah, I mean, people immediately, when they see something like that. So even if you have just one or two things you want to point out, there's no sense in really giving a table like that. Yeah, there's alternate ways to present that, maybe in a bar graph or something that might be effective that you'd want to reconsider. And then, yeah, so, answering questions, you want to look people in the eye and respond to what they're asking, obviously. But and he says I have additional visuals, but I personally have rarely ever resorted to ones that come after my conclusion or acknowledgement slides. So I don't generally ever do that. But if there are slides that you've taken out, you can move them, down beyond the last slide and have them just in case you just don't know. But oftentimes there's not a lot of time for questions. So yeah, that was the presentation. So if you guys have any questions, or
Kind of a silly question, but so in undergrad, we had to do a senior seminar very similar to this, and I'm going to be going off of that for this class. But I had to present it on Zoom, so that's when COVID happened, and I couldn't present it in person. So I had a lot of animation in my thing because I couldn't point things out. Would you recommend taking those out for an in-person presentation?
So Sierra asked for you guys out there in Zoom land, if she had done a presentation for a class last year when schools were closed down, and then used a lot of animation. So wondering if that would be still good to use. Well, I think so.
I mean, none of us have seen it, so
Right.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the kind of animations that I think are kind of kitschy or I forget, there was one, and like, I forget what it was, what grad student did this really cartoonish like something like a bird flying in and dropping the figures in there or something like that. I was like, oh, okay. This might be kind of fun, but it doesn't seem very professional. So, you have to use some discretion and yeah.
Arrows or.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it can just be overdone, like those two things I did, like the thing rotated away and then or vaporized, if every slide did that, it might get, and there's no, maybe there's no improved understanding that's gained by doing that. It's just sort of gee whiz type stuff. So, but there's incredible improved understanding by phasing in different graphics into your figure instead of just plopping them down all at once and then going sequentially. And so yeah, I don't let me discourage you from doing anything like that. I think those are really valuable. I do it some in my talks, but not too much. I should do more of it actually.
Mike,
Yeah.
how many blank sessions or blank weeks do we have? Like 3 or 4? I mean, so in the semester that we're not doing anything?
Yeah, I
So-
think I don't remember but I think we just have one in February and then the rest of the semester.
All taken. Okay, I didn't. What I was going to suggest is that sometimes it's good practice just to give like a quick little 15-minute talk and have the students, I mean, I know it's probably not a very popular idea, but have the students just give a little quick either chalk talk or 15-minute talk just to kind of give practice, like being on your feet, and trying to lay something out really fast, but still be kind of clear and stuff about it. But I didn't know how much extra time we had, but.
Yeah, not double of what we have now, but I think these talks will hopefully serve that purpose effectively.
Okay.
And yeah, and we're going to evaluate. I got to figure out some way of, in the class here in person, we can do written evaluations, but maybe just email evaluations could be sent to me, and then I'll make them anonymous, and then I'll pass them on to the speaker so they get some direct feedback. Yeah, 30 to, I mean, we have an hour, 50 minutes, so maybe 40 max, and then a good amount of time for questions, but hopefully everyone will chime in with questions just to make it a little more stimulating for the speaker. Yeah, so those of you who are in second year, well, I guess I already asked that. I mean, I don't know what stage you're at in terms of your dissertation proposal, but let's plan on giving a talk on that, and it'll be good practice. And I would do the same 30 to 40-minute presentation. And it could be a proposal-like talk, like here's what I plan to do, or you could just talk about results that you've already gotten. So I'm fine with either one of those. Of course, if you are getting your dissertation proposal done this semester, then you would have to give just a proposal talk and talk about what you're going to do for your thesis work. Okay, so anything else? Anybody out there?
So is the audience just our class then?
Oh, well, no, I will get Taylor to send out the announcement. Generally, just close friends and the research advisors come, things like that. So I think there'll be plenty of room for social distancing in the room here for that. But so yeah, everyone's invited, but then ultimately not many students come to them.
Okay.
In my experience anyway. Okay, well, I will post a link to this if anybody wants this talk, or well, if you want the talk itself, I could give it to you, but the recording too, I'll give you access to. Okay. And then I won't ever have to give this presentation ever again.
We're all just gonna be fantastic at
What's that?
it. I said, we're all just gonna be fantastic at it.
Yeah, well, I won't give it, I don't know who's gonna do this next year because Nigel usually does it because he's on sabbatical this year, so. That's why I just stole Chris's talk instead of developing it myself. But it is interesting because all my lectures now are videoed. And so now like aquatic chemistry, next time I teach it, I was like, well, go ahead and watch the videos and just let me know when you're done. We'll have a test at the end of the semester.
You know, I love being able to access like videos.
Do you?
So yeah,
Yeah.
it helps. I think it puts things in context. There's some things you'll say in class that aren't like in the book necessarily, or they don't jump out at you in some way. So,
Yeah, I think they're useful that way. I was kidding about actually having them, as a default instead of giving new lectures, but
the pharmacy program does one of a couple of the classes this
yeah.
year.
One of my undergrads in instrumental analysis this semester said her calculus class, her professor, because I use this, so I lecture and then it's up here, but it's also, it goes out. So I use the document projector. You guys can't see me. But anyway, she said, oh, I have a professor write his notes. Then he'd hold them up to the screen. Like, what? Because this works actually really well. I've never used one of these in my life. But it's just like it's like writing on the whiteboard, but I don't have to, this goes right to the computer and shared screen in Zoom. So I never have to point the camera or anything like that to capture the, because I've heard also that professors have been using the whiteboards. Is this,
Yeah,
I think Orion's been using
has he? Yeah. Yeah, God, because this is, I mean, I don't like having to use this, but it's super clear to the students. I mean, with this, you can kind of have to, you point the camera up there and, I didn't like doing it that way anyway, so. Okay.
Well, it looks like Mike just leave.
I guess you're the presenter now, Lin-Chu.
Yeah, it looks like I'm the host now. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I think that was the end anyway.
I guess we're done. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess we're done.
yeah.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.
See you.
Bye-bye.